Welcome to Glorious Professionals, episode 22, brought to you by GORUCK Media. I'm Jason, here with Emily. Our guest tonight is Chad Malone. Chad holds a Doctorate of Physical Therapy from George Washington University and works in healthcare in Washington, D.C., where he's also the owner of Capital MMA and Elite Fitness Lorton. We got to meet Chad and his wife and kids at GORUCK Selection last year. We stayed in touch, and after he posted some of his thoughts on the current state of race relations in America, I reached out and asked him if he'd come on the show to share his story and perspective. Chad, welcome to Glorious Professionals.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so your kids are in bed-ish. Our kids are in bed-ish. It's a little bit after 9 o'clock on a Saturday, and just wanted to kind of dig in to some of your story and your perspective.
Yeah.
And since my getting back in touch with you started out with a post that you made, let's catch everyone up and fill us in.
All right. Here it goes. This is what I wrote. To all my white friends who have sent text, messaged, and asked if I was okay, I'm sorry I lied. I probably told you that I was okay. This is because I'm strong and very fortunate. I was raised in a home with both parents. I was on honor roll at school and earned an athletic scholarship to college. I earned a bachelor's degree and then a doctorate. I have a career in the health field, and I'm a business owner with a family of my own. But regardless of all the things I have done right in my life, this does not change the fact that I grew up with the history of slavery in my family. My earliest visual memories include people who look like me being attacked by dogs, police officers, and high-pressure hoses simply because they asked for equal rights. I remember the Rodney King beating and the riots that ensued, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, and the legal assassination of countless other Black men and women who look just like me and my brothers have become an everyday expectation. And God forbid, I hope to expect justice for the lives of the men and women whose lives are unjustly cut short. Despite my degrees and contributions to my community, I still get followed by security in the stores. If there is a white customer in the store along with me, I can expect them to be served first. I know not to run late at night because I've been trailed by police officers when all I was doing was going out for a jog. I've had my house raided because I fit the description of a Black male that drives a certain car. I've had the police officer pull a gun on me as I reach for the wallet after he asked me for my license and registration. I have family members who served in Korea and the Vietnam War to return home not as a hero, but I'm going to go ahead and use the word, but just another nigger in America. I have seen and experienced all of this. I have a doctorate degree, own a home, still married to my wife, and follow all the rules. Yet I do not expect to get fair treatment in this country because I know the color of my skin will have direct implications on how certain people judge me. I also realize that these same people will put people like Stacey Dash and Candace Owen out as a token for our race to speak for us despite the vast diaspora upbringing backgrounds that we represent. We're the only community where it's routine for one of us to be chosen to speak for our whole community. And I only speak for my community because this is the only community that I have experienced in. We are forced to decide between our community and those who are sworn and protected. We are pitted against our own laws and the system of the country in which we live. And then we get messages from those who pretend to respect us to say, well, if George Floyd had have done this or done that, then he would have been still been alive. If Trayvon Martin had have done this or done that, he would still be alive. If Philando Castillo, if Ahmaud Arbery have done this or that, they would have still been alive. Well, I say that the justice system that is supposed to protect us all equally had have done their job, and they would all still be alive. Or maybe if Colin Kaepernick's First Amendment right had have been respected, then maybe they would have heard the words behind the protest. Or maybe Tommy Smith and John Carlos's protests, or Joe Green or Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. These are just the athletes that chose to forfeit their prosperity for equal judgment of people that look like me. So don't tell me that you respect me and then turn a deaf ear when I tell you that I'm hurting. I don't need more likes or comments, friends, or degrees. What I want is equal protection under the law and equal opportunity, not just for the fortunate like me, but for everybody in this country. So, no, I'm not okay, but I'm strong. My people have made it this far after 400 plus years of slavery and oppression. My grandfather taught me to hold my head up high. My parents taught me to never quit. So I'll be okay. And that's why I tell you that I am. So that was my post.
That's powerful, man. What was the reaction you got? Mostly positive or?
The reaction was positive. Honestly, I didn't expect, just like I said in the post, I didn't care if anybody had reacted to it or not. I had some stuff I needed to get off my chest, and the response was very positive, and that definitely helped turn my mood around. So I'm fortunate to have friends around me that are willing to at least have conversations about what's going on right now. So I was real happy about that.
So what was the sort of right before you post that? I want to get into a lot of it because I think this is
Yeah,
exactly the type of I want to get into your story, right?
yeah.
But just because you've just read that, like, what was right before that? You're like, this is it. I got to take a stand.
All right, so it goes way back, man. It's just not the first time, and you get sick of it. Like I said in the post, man, I grew up with I spent a lot of time real close to both my grandparents, and then and my parents were in my life growing up, and both of my grandparents are products of the Great Migration, or were part of the Great Migration. So both my grandparents came from the South. My maternal grandfather moved from Alabama to the Midwest, and then my grandfather on my father's side also moved from the South up to the Midwest. Both in areas that were hit by race riots in the 50s and 60s in East St. Louis and Inkster, Michigan, that had some of the worst race riots of that time. Like I said in the post, also, my one grandfather, he was an educator. But before that, in high school, he was a great athlete. Then he got drafted and he went to the Vietnam War, came back, obviously, missed those athletic years, but he still, pushed through, went to college, and then he became an educator and was, a teacher, principal. And my other grandfather was a lawyer, ended up being a corporate lawyer. They both experienced in their life, a lot of racism. It legit directed the ways they went in their life. My father's father, my paternal grandfather, for instance, was the corporate lawyer for a major oil company. And my grandfather was brilliant and did a lot of good work. At a certain point, they literally just came in his office and said, we're going to give this white guy your job. You can either be fired or you can retire today. And he was forced to retire. They paid him out, probably not as much as they would have paid the next guy. But that was the end of his career and as a corporate lawyer.
So how does that work? I mean, how is that passed down through your family? I mean, you're telling me this story. Like I've got stories about my grandfather. I don't have a story like that.
Yeah.
And
So what happens is like you grow up with this. So you grow up with these stories. You grow up with, my grandfather showing us pictures of these riots and telling us, because you don't get it in school. You still don't get it in school, especially back, when we were in school, you didn't get it. You only got the side of the history that they wanted you to have. And so my grandparents and my parents made sure that we knew, the struggles that not just our family, but the Black community have gone through from their time to then. You get this, and as a kid, you're a kid, so you don't really take it in. You hear it, and it's just a story. And the first instance that ever really got to me was Trayvon Martin. That was the first one where at that time I was an adult. I think I was in my early 20s at the time. Well, well, there was Rodney King, but Rodney King, again, I was a kid. So Trayvon Martin was the first one that actually got to me. And you hear the story, and it just does not make sense. And I remember sitting there watching the broadcast when they were going to announce the verdict for George Zimmerman, and I'm like, oh, there's no way he's gonna get off on this. Like he killed a kid for no reason. He followed the kid. The police officers told him not to follow him. He engaged the kid. He instigated the whole thing, and then you get to kill him, and then he gets off on, with no remorse and no repercussions. And so that was the first one that got to me. And then they start piling up, and it's just name after name after name. And I'm I've always been the type where, I don't really like conflict, especially verbal conflict. I'm not, I talk a lot to the people that I know, but I'm not really a talkative guy. So all of this, I would hear it and you would just take it in and internalize it. And, in my realm, I encounter a lot of people of different races, white, everybody. And I never wanted to offend anybody by, sharing my pain with them. So I kept it all in. And the Saturday that I wrote that post, I'm sitting here and it was the Saturday after the riots. So the riots were started that Monday and this is Saturday. And you have, everybody on the news, blaming Antifa for the riots and blaming, taking pictures of the riots and looters. And then it moves from that to, well, George Floyd, did this and he did that. And, I think they even tried to say he had health conditions that led to his death and he had drugs in his system. Man, I'm in the health field. You can't tell me that hypertension and cholesterol is going to lead to sudden death. Like, don't try to pull the wool over my eyes. And he has some drugs in his system. Okay, I probably have some drugs in my system right now too. The majority of Americans have some drugs in their system right now. He doesn't have the level that's going to cause sudden death.
8 minutes and 46 seconds is not suddenly.
Right, right. And so I'm just livid. And they do this over and over again. They did the same thing with Trayvon Martin. Oh, well, you take somebody, you kill him, and then you demonize that person so that the person who committed the crime gets off on it. And then we're stuck with the story of, oh, well, if he had have done this, if he had have just complied, and why was he taking pictures holding a gun, and why was he, have his middle finger up on Facebook? And all right, well, people live checker past, but that doesn't give somebody else the right to come and kill them. Just then and there, because you have a badge or for whatever reason. I don't care whether you have a badge or not. It's not your right to do that. And then they demonize the person, the victim afterwards. So that's what really got to me, man. Especially this time that they try to pull it on some BS health issues. Like that's like we're not that dumb.
So what was it like with Trayvon Martin then, and compare it to now, the sort of emotional response,
Yeah.
and not just yourself. I mean, do you talk to your wife about this? Do you talk to your
Oh
kids
yeah.
about this? Like, how do you process it?
Yeah. So when Trayvon Martin happened, Jasmine and I had just got married. And it was hard for me to concentrate on that one also because my mom was going through, I think, her second bout of breast cancer this time. And so, I wasn't all there. But either way, I was young. I hadn't found my voice yet. So you take it, and it, it's sad to say that a lot of minorities or Black people, I'm just going to say Black people because I don't know what other people think. I know the Black community.
That seems really fair.
Yeah, yeah, we've gotten to a point where it's just like we just throw our hands up in the air and it's like, all right, well, this is how it is. There's nothing I can do about it. And that's literally what I did with Trayvon Martin. In my heart, I was hoping, but when he got off on it, I said, well, that's America. He's out on the streets. He's good to go. The difference between that and now is that, I found my voice. That's for sure. And not only that, but I've come to a point in my life where it's like you're either gonna value me for who I am, respect who I am and what I have to say, or you don't, and I don't need you in my life. So that's it. Um,
Okay, so let's back up just a little bit more. You talked about your grandparents. Talk to us about your parents then. I mean,
yeah,
because in their generation, they saw different things. And then
yeah.
your kids are going to see different things and be influenced stronger by other things. So what was it like at home growing up?
Um, my upbringing was it was, I guess it was average. It wasn't perfect, but I had both parents in my home and we weren't beat or anything. But so to give you context, I have to take it even further than that. For most Black people my age, you can count back 4 generations and you find slavery. So my great grandmother, she just passed last November. Her parents were slaves and became sharecroppers. So she grew up in the fields. So she passed down, that history to my grandparents, and then that gets passed down. So the way we were raised is like you weren't raised as if you were part of this country, really. So I have this conversation with a lot of my friends now. So I get the question sometimes when people see that I do like the GORUCK events and stuff, and they're like, well, how come you never joined the military? You would have been great for that stuff. And the answer is because we didn't grow up in that same America where you aspire to serve a country because that country didn't serve us. We grew up where it was common. It's like you put everything, my grandfather, for instance, put everything into a career. And then that career is somebody can just come and take it from him because he's Black. And so we were raised, this is your country. Like, you should be proud to be American, but you can't trust them because at any given moment, this could be you.
Yeah. I'm thinking about that and how much of like the promise can't be fulfilled by that. You have your grandparents telling these stories to your parents and there's got to be this hope that things are going to get better, right? Like
Yeah.
each generation, like, well, maybe it'll be different, but it seems like what you're telling us is that they're telling us, hey, you can't trust the system, so here's the other way. These are the rules that we have to follow in order
Yeah.
to stay alive, to protect ourselves, to band together.
Yeah.
Here you are, 4 generations removed from slavery, and you're going to have this conversation with your son
Yeah.
on some level, and hopefully it will be better. But I hear my friends in the Black community saying the same words. I'm sick and tired.
Yeah.
And this is where it's at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. My son is 8, and we have already had to have multiple talks with him about this. The other day, we were playing in the backyard because you can't go to the pool. So we, buy a little blow up pool. So the kids are playing in the blow up pool. I get off of work a little bit early, so I come and I take him and our little boy who lives around the corner from us, take him on bike rides. So the little boy who lives around the corner from us, I'm fortunate, but that I have parents who taught us certain things is so that so that we're not a target. We're not given any extra ammunition. So my father and mother had certain talks with me. So the little kid, his parents obviously didn't have the same talk with him. So he's just running around the neighborhood with no shirt on. And at first I'm sitting here, I'm like, he's a kid. So I'm not worried about it at all. And then they had this talk with me. We had a pool in our neighborhood, and I used to walk around the neighborhood back and forth to the house without my shirt on. And I thought I had some muscles, so I like to show off my muscles. I came in the house one day, and my dad was like, don't walk around here without a shirt on. And I said, oh, okay. I never really asked him why, because you don't ask him why, because you just get beat then. And so I said, all right. But in my head, I'm just thinking, well, he's just saying that because he's a fuddy-duddy and, he's getting his beer belly and he doesn't want to walk around with this shirt on. So he's telling me the same thing. And now I'm having that conversation with the neighborhood kids and my sons. And I realized it had nothing to do with my dad being a fuddy-duddy. It's because, you're already Black. So you're already a target in some people's eyes. And then you walk around with no shirt on and now you're a thug. So the same reason why I don't run at night, because you're running through a community or running through a neighborhood. Next thing you know, somebody thinks that you're running because you're trying to escape the scene of a crime or something like that. So it's sad that I had to have that talk with my 8-year-old son in 2020 about why he can't walk around with no shirt on, even though it's 90 degrees outside.
And he's probably super jacked like you.
He was happy today because he said he can make his muscles move like mine.
Oh, nice. Yeah, but it's true. Our boys run around with their shirts off all the time. I've never even thought about making them put on a shirt outside because it would make them, more of a target. And, I've seen a lot of stuff. I've learned a lot over, the last few weeks. And, I'm not proud to say that I didn't know a lot of these things, but a lot of it is it wasn't taught, right? And I didn't have all these conversations, but to think about where the slave patrols came from, and this history that it's not in the books. You have to
Yeah,
search for it, but it's good to know these things, and
yeah,
to be able to talk about them now, and to talk about them with our children too.
yeah, 100%. I had a conversation with one of my patients. I love what I do because of the people that I meet, and I get to meet a lot of older guys and women who have really cool stories. So I had this one patient who he was a white guy, he was a lawyer, but this guy, he had like 2 PhDs and he was taking master's classes. Dude is like 80 years old. I think he went to Harvard, and I was asking him, what did it take to become a lawyer? Why did you go into this? And he's telling me that, when he was doing his pre-law, his undergrad, they had 2 choices. If they wanted to become a lawyer, they could either major in history or philosophy. And I said, well, that's interesting. And it makes me think, because there's that phrase all the time, if you don't know your history, then you're bound to repeat it, or something like that. And if that's so true, and if it's so important for a lawyer to either understand history or philosophy, why do we hide the full history of this country like we do? And this is why this thing keeps repeating. Like, if you think about the freedoms of the slaves and the freedoms and the oppressions of the slaves and where we are today, there's not a whole lot that happened to make sure that everybody is equal in this country despite of race. You have the amendments that were passed so that you can't legally have slaves unless you're in jail, because if you're in prison, then you can still be a legal slave. But there was not much done. The history is hidden, and the system hasn't changed. It's just that, you're not in chains anymore. And then people just sit there and expect to say, well, this is, 400 years later, you should be caught up by now. But how? How do you expect everybody to be caught up? Um, Again, I was fortunate that I had 2 parents in the home, and both my parents worked, and education was paramount in my household.
Yeah. I have to say, I have to admit that I never had heard about the Tulsa massacre until like the last
Yeah.
couple weeks. I
Hmm.
mean, that's
Yeah.
just like a huge piece of history. I mean, it was like known as the
Hmm.
Black Wall Street, and it just,
Yeah.
massive attacks, and just something that I like loved history, and I, studied really hard. It's probably not something I missed. It might not have been there, but I mean, how did you learn about that separately, like through your parents or your grandparents or church or friends? Like, how
Yeah.
did you hear about these things?
Um, when you get older, you start to appreciate these things. But I've always had a good community around me, whether it been the old school Southern Baptist church that we grew up in, to my grandparents, where, passing down these histories and education were important to. I'm not a big reader, so, I listen to a lot of podcasts and I do audiobooks and stuff now. But, that's how we had to learn things. I'm looking at this book that my grandfather gave me, this coffee table book that he had, 1001 Things Everyone Should Know About African American History. So this is the book that was on his coffee table that, he sent me home with one summer after we visited him. So that's where we would get this from. We have to search for it, but it's important to know, because, it directly impacts us.
Mm-hmm.
Take Muhammad Ali, for instance. A good friend of mine. Well, he's my brother. He's not just a good friend of mine. Paul, he's my brother.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking last summer, and he had just watched the documentary that they did on Muhammad Ali. I think it was on HBO.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were having a conversation, and he was saying, well, he always thought growing up that Muhammad Ali was just a draft dodger, and, and a boxer that ran his mouth. And it's not Paul's fault that that's all new, because, that's what was promoted about him, trying to tear his character down. But it took somebody putting forth effort to, spread the information that, he wasn't just a draft dodger. He had principles that he was standing up for, and he was a pillar in his community. And he was more than just a loudmouth boxer, much more than a loudmouth boxer. But the history is not passed along. When I was in school, the only 2 Black people you would learn about was Martin Luther King and George Washington Carver. Those damn peanuts. That's all you will learn about.
No Harriet Tubman.
I don't remember learning about Harriet Tubman. Maybe they might have briefly ran over it and talked about the Underground Railroad, because I remember thinking about, well, how many trains go underground? That's what I remember thinking. And then also, I went to Howard University. So, the discussion comes up every now and then in my groups is, why do you still need historically Black colleges in this day and age? Well, you need historically Black colleges because without them, number one, a lot of this history will be lost because the records are there. We had to take a certain amount of African American history classes, or just straight up African history classes. Like, it was mandatory because this is who you are. So you should know your history. I'm going to say it. We're the only culture where we are demonized for being proud of who we are. If I make a fist and say Black Lives Matter, like, why are you mad because I'm proud of who I am and I say that our lives matter? I'm not saying that yours doesn't. Because I'm proud of my history doesn't mean that you shouldn't be proud of yours. You should be as proud as yours as you are of mine. So, that's one reason why HBCUs are important for the history, but also, even still to this day, a majority of the Black doctors, dentists, and lawyers in this country come out of HBCUs, particularly Howard University, because it's the most illustrious HBCU in the land.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so Chad, to sort of take it up a notch, right? So I'll give you my perspective before I ask this. So on a special forces team in the military, that's where I saw diversity work, right? You've got people coming from all over the country and some fighting to become citizens. And, you come and everybody has this different background. And, you've got some guys that were mechanics, some guys that were bankers, some guys that were, take your pick. You literally have had all of it, especially right after 9/11, when you got all this wave of people who came in. And, there's the old adage about, if you saw Full Metal Jacket, it's like you're all equally worthless in the eyes of your drill sergeant. And, that's kind of the culture, and you see it work really well. And there is kind of a life or death take on diversity, meaning everybody's not supposed to be the same. And I don't want to equate equality with the same, because I think there's an element of justice that we'll get to in a second. But diversity was celebrated like that. It's like if one dude's strong and one dude's fast, guess what? That's awesome, because you'll be in different situations, and the fast dude's going to be first in the door, and the strong dude's going to be, kicking the door in, whatever, right? There's a million situations like that. And so equality is thrown around. To me, I equate it to justice, right? Watching what those police officers did, it's just straight up wrong. And they should go to jail. And it's not okay in any circumstance whatsoever. Like, if you're doing that job, and I've done that job to a certain extent overseas, not here. It is a very difficult job. It's hard to police large crowds. There's emotions. You have to sort of, the people that are making your life hard when you're in law enforcement, you have to almost dehumanize them in order to hopefully make good decisions. In some case, you make bad decisions, right? Now, what I'm getting at though is how do we have this country that's unified while still respecting diversity? Because I don't think we want to just take everybody and say everybody's same, everybody's equal.
Yeah.
A lot of words get tossed around a lot of different ways. Yeah. How do we do it so that, you're right, you should not lose your history. That's sacred. Your roots. Your family will always have those roots, for better, for worse, it's obviously a huge stain on the original sin of America, right? Slavery. It's nobody's proud that anybody did that, but it is what it is now, right? To a certain extent, like that is your past.
Yeah,
and
it
that's our
happened.
country's past. That's
Right.
what happened. Now, how do we because I believe that diversity makes us stronger.
Right.
Period, the end. And so how do we figure out a way to make this work?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I see what you're saying. I'm tracking. In every realm that I know of in studies, when you're looking at, ecosystems with animals or plants, or you're talking about a business, and all these are very important. Like you can't have all of the same species living in one ecosystem because they're going to die. They have nothing else to eat unless they eat each other. If I'm running a business, I don't want to have a bunch of people who think just like me, because then I'm just going to do what I was going to do anyway. I'm not going to come up with any new ideas. America is different. Diversity obviously is important. And what you just mentioned is the same that I hear about, a lot of my friends who served in the military or are in the military. And, they say, regardless of where you come from, day one, you're meeting people, who look different than you, that grew up different backgrounds than you. And like you're forced into diversity, and you are forced to learn the importance of it. Because if you don't learn it, then you're not going to succeed anyway. I think in America, there is not enough emphasis, or there's no importance on it. So you have people that don't want it. You have a group of people who don't want diversity. You have people who, don't get out of their bubble. So, if I grew up in rural Alabama and this is all I know, I might not be a racist or a bigot myself personally, but everybody that I know looks just like me. Everybody that I know thinks a certain way. So at this point, until you adopt those principles for yourself, it's just ignorance. So because you never got out of that bubble. And then you have some people, who are just miseducated and choose to stay that way. So all that to say, diversity obviously is very important. But until there is more done in America to promote that diversity, it's not going to happen. And this is why I said earlier that, if you look at the state of America, immediately after the slaves were freed and today, not too much has changed when you think about justice and equality in this country. Until people in power see that it's important enough to risk their careers to push for that for diversity, it's not going to happen. And I think, too often the people who are supposed to represent us are too scared to forfeit their career. They want the clout of being a congressman or a senator. So they align themselves with a certain party, and they're going to vote down the party line, regardless of what they think in their heart and regardless of what their constituents want. These protests show you that, there's a lot of people that want diversity in America. So when are the lawmakers gonna listen to this? When is the change actually gonna happen?
So diversity, equality, justice. I mean, I keep coming back to this idea that there's so much energy within the African American culture, and you see it a lot of places. I mean, to me, there is a lot of diversity to that end. I mean, rewind a few decades. Like, look, man, I'm a white guy that loved Michael Jordan as a kid, right? I mean, like
Who didn't?
he could do no wrong. And, still to
Right.
this day, I mean, he was just an enormous idol of mine. And, you've seen businesses.
Hmm.
Michael Jordan is probably the biggest success story, but now, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
you've got billboards, you've got advertisements. Like, look, this is not equality.
Yeah, 100%. So I don't think this is where you were going with it, but this is one of the arguments that I hear from people that kind of just it blows my mind, in that, we had a black president in Barack Obama. We have Michael Jordan. There are plenty of, successful black owned businesses. There are black millionaires. So there are successful black people. And what certain people like to do is they say, well, if they did it despite of their race, why can't you do it? And for that, I go back to everybody is not so fortunate. There are legit things, there was legislation or practices that were intentionally done to hold Black people back. You had the Jim Crow laws. Everybody should know about the Jim Crow laws, but everybody doesn't. You had redlining, which kept Black people from moving into certain neighborhoods. I have a patient who lives up in Northwest. He was the second Black person to buy a home in the neighborhood that he lives in. And on the deed of his house, it says that no Black person is allowed to own that house or live in that house. So he has the servant quarters in his basement where if you were, wealthy and you had a servant, most likely they're a Black person, they could stay there, but they couldn't live there. I had another patient. He was one of the first Black people on the realtor board in DC. He was investigated for 2 years for him to be on the realtor board. That's not normal. And these were successful people that I'm talking about. So just think, like, you had systems in place and still have systems in place to hold a group of people back. So nobody's saying send out a reparations check to everybody and boom, everybody's caught up. That's not what we're saying. We're saying acknowledge that there were systems in place and invest in helping people catch up. I don't want to check, but what I would like to see is more rec centers in Southeast. I would like to see more healthy food stores in Southeast. I would like to see more educational opportunities for these kids. These kids are just running around the streets and they have nothing to do. And you wonder why, crime happens, because they have nothing and they don't know, they're ignorant. And so it's easy to fall into that. So just because you have a few people who are successful doesn't mean there aren't a whole host of other people that are still recovering or don't even know that they need to recover.
Yeah. So a couple guys at the top, I mean, that doesn't bring a lot specifically at the community level.
No.
And I guess my only point was those are small steps forward.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like because of having Barack Obama as president, it's a step forward for all of the good things of diversity and inclusiveness and stuff like that. And he'll probably be remembered as the first Black president, and for Obamacare when you really boil it down in 100 years. And it takes first steps to get to second steps and bigger steps. But the thing that really angers me in this is just the injustice.
Yeah.
And that is not equal treatment. It's just a string and it's a pattern. And so look, I agree with people who are out protesting in the streets peacefully. I mean, I think that it's the only way you're ever going to get something to change.
Yeah.
Like sitting around, I had a cadre long time ago. He's like, hey, hope in one hand and shit in the other and see which one fills up first. Right. And it's like, you can hope every generation that, well, something's going to get better, but eventually you have to do something. And does it feel like it's a little bit of shock and awe right now?
It feels like America on repeat. Honestly, that's what it feels like. We've been through this before. We protested it in the 50s. We protested in the 60s. We protested in the 70s, in the 80s. And here we are again in 2020 protesting. You're just like, when does it stop? And when does it become acknowledged? And I think what I think the beautiful thing about this time around is that in all those protests in the past, although there were white people who joined in those protests and marches, but for these ones in DC, like, there's more white people downtown protesting than there are Black people. And I think that's beautiful. I think what it opens up is some white people are scared to engage and talk about this. They're ashamed or worried or feel like they don't know what to say to their Black friends, and they want to know more to help out, but they don't know how to help out. And so that's one of the many things, one of the small things that I can take out of this protest and I can be happy about. Now we're actually engaging in these conversations that should have happened years ago. I would much rather somebody sit down, talk to me, ask me about this stuff over a beer or whatever, than to have preconceived notions in your head or, going off of what somebody else told you that doesn't really know what they're talking about because they haven't experienced it. So I think it's opened up this dialogue, and I hope it continues to go forward because I mean, most Black people would jump at the chance to talk to a white person about how do they feel about relations, and because here's the other thing that I mentioned in my post is that like the media or certain people put out there to speak for our whole community, and oftentimes it's not the right person because they are not really even part of our community. They got brown skin, but they're not marching with us. They didn't get that same history that I got growing up, so they can pretend it never existed because they have enough money in their pockets, so they can be in certain circles where they feel like racism doesn't affect them. But if you go down the street in DC or wherever and you meet a handful of people, like I'm sure 9 out of 10 of them can tell you at least one instance in their life where racism has directly affected them, either in a small way or a major way. So it still happens, and we would much rather have the conversations to educate people than to have ignorance continue. Because in this time you have people who continue these same practices out of hatred, these same injustices out of hatred. You have the apathetic, the person, because it doesn't affect them, they just are gonna let it fly and pretend as if it doesn't exist. And then you have the ignorant, and not ignorant as in like they're dumb or a derogatory term, but ignorant, they just don't know. They've
Hmm.
never been educated. And I have a very diverse circle, but the majority of my inner circle is Black. And so I can talk to a handful of white people, and then I hope that those white people can go talk to their white friends and feel comfortable about saying, "Hey, I had a conversation with Chad about this, and this is how they're feeling." And then because they have that conversation, maybe their friend feels comfortable to go talk to another Black person. And this is how we get to the point where America and communities can embrace diversity and try to understand each other rather than just sticking with what you've been told from somebody who is not even in the community.
So I think inertia is kind of one of the big problems, right? The inertia of just everyone's going about their daily lives, and you live in the suburbs, and
Hmm.
people go about their lives and they have their social circles, and you stay within those social circles, and like finds like.
Yeah,
And what is happening now is a revolution against inertia brought
yeah,
about by a lack of justice.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and so, it feels like there's a lot of momentum, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, it does, as you say, hey, we're doing this again
yeah,
and again and again. I mean, the justice part feels not the easiest to solve because it also keeps happening, but it seems the
yeah,
most cut and dried to me, right? I mean,
yeah,
everything's about to be on Facebook Live. Everything
yeah.
is. I mean, Rodney King that was insane. It was shown because someone just sort of happened to have a video camera.
Hmm.
Guess what?
Yeah,
Everybody's got a video camera now.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
it was groundbreaking like that.
yeah. And this is what infuriates me so much is that you know it's only because we have camera phones readily available now that this is making the news, and that's the ones that actually make the news. There was recording of Ahmaud Arbery's assassination, and that wasn't on TV until it spread virally online, and they forced it to be on TV. But these injustices have been happening. They've been happening, for years now. And now that there's video, we are actually aware of it.
So this is a good thing though. That's my point, right? I mean,
Yeah,
without the
yeah, yeah,
video, I mean,
yeah,
and look, I'm not condoning the violence. I'm not condoning the looting and all of this stuff. I mean, every revolution is always going to have radicals within a revolution. It doesn't mean that the
yeah,
revolution shouldn't go forward, right? But
yeah,
when you start to say because of the technology, it's actually forcing. I mean, we're having to pull out the mirror, and lots of times when you pull
yeah,
out a mirror as a country, it's uncomfortable.
yeah, 100%. And so we can talk about the protest and how it is being received and how it is being, broadcasted. And let's bring it all the way back to Colin Kaepernick's protest. Every protest is supposed to be uncomfortable. If it was comfortable, then it wouldn't be a protest. if our life, the people who are protesting, if their lives were comfortable, then they wouldn't be protesting. But they're making you feel uncomfortable because they feel uncomfortable. So, so again, Colin Kaepernick is demonized for speaking out on what we're protesting now. And then the protest happens and the city kind of erupted. But let's look at it this way. You have an injustice that has been happening. People want to get out and protest. In this group, you have three groups of people. You have the protesters, you have the rioters, and you have the looters. But certain people want to blend all of that together, and it's not all the same. Number one, I'm not 100% against rioting, because when you feel the pain that we have been feeling for years, like sometimes that shit comes out physically, and it is what it is. Like it sucks that businesses get broken into and burned, but damn, like people are hurting, and that's the streets talking. Like some people are gonna put that shit out physically, and that is just is what it is. So you can't say that riots never do any good, because they make you look and they make you consider the change.
Yeah, it's certainly, I understand your point, right? I mean, sometimes
Yeah,
if what you're doing isn't working and you feel like it's not working, then
yeah,
you put, I mean, this is the sort of MLK versus Malcolm X, right? Debate. And you say, look, in any revolution, you're going to have people at extremes. And
yeah,
for revolutions to be successful, look at history. It's like it
yeah,
has to have that. And now,
yeah,
look, I'm not gonna. I think it does a disservice. I'm not gonna say rioting is good, and I don't want violence and all of this stuff. But I understand what you're saying about the need to draw greater attention to the overall injustice. I get that, and
right.
to go back to something, to bring up Colin Kaepernick, the hardest thing that I've heard you say in our conversation is it's almost like it's not as much your country because it's not as equal for you, and how you kind of have to go back into the Black community. That's where you feel the safest and the most understood.
Yeah, I'd say, again, I'm only going to speak about my community because that's all I know about. But I'd say that most Black people feel like that they don't grow up in the same America as white people do. It's weird to explain, because it's not that you hate your country. You definitely don't hate your country. You wouldn't want to be any place else, know. But you don't grow up with that same. There's a lot of pride to be had with, my grandfather fought in this war and he was a proud American who served this country. And then my father was a proud American who served this country, and everything. Although there's bumps in the roads, everybody has bumps in the roads, but it looks like there's a clear model from one to another, and there's a lot to be proud of. But growing up Black in America, there's there's not as much to be proud of. Is I could say that I made it, right. I have a career, I have a good education, I have a family, and I have a little bit of money in my bank account. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. But at any given moment, I also know that the same thing that happened to George Floyd could easily happen to me. It, has come close to happening before. I have friends who, a police officer pulled a gun out on one of my buddies when he was a 9-year-old kid. So it's almost like that 2 steps forward, 1 step back type relationship. Like every time there's moments where you can really be proud of, of the country, then it seems like the system of the country would do something to to let you know, hey man, you're still Black, right? You're only going to make it so far. Um, and and it becomes frustrating. And part of the reason why it becomes frustrating to talk about, because when you share these feelings with certain people, they'll say, "Oh, it's just the race card." It's not because you're Black. That's not why you feel that. Why you're getting that response? It's because of this, or it's because of that. And number one, that just becomes infuriating, and it makes people not want to share. But I'd ask the people who say that, when your significant other tells you that they feel a certain way because they perceive that you did something a certain way, if you're a decent human being, you don't just sit there and tell them, "Hey, suck it up." That's not what really happened. This is what really happened. You don't treat people that way. But for some reason, it's okay to say that black people. It's okay to say, hey, you're just pulling the race card. That's not really how it was. That's just the race card. Instead of just having the conversation and then maybe getting understanding. Because sometimes, honestly, sometimes it is just me. Like, I remember one time I took my wife out for our anniversary. We went to a really nice restaurant, and we walk in there. I think it was one of those restaurants where you have to wear a sports coat or a suit or whatever. And we don't go out to restaurants like that often. We go to Olive Garden and stuff, but we're doing it up. And we walk in here.
All you can eat salad and breadsticks. That's for the win.
So we walk in here, and it's a bunch of rich people, and so odds are most of them are white. And we're like sitting down, and they give us this really nice seat, and we're like sitting right next to the piano, but we're like feeling awkward as hell. And we're like, man, we're the only black people in here. But I tell you what, we got some awesome service. Like, we got great service. Everybody was super nice. So in that instant, yes, it was just me. But if I didn't have the background that I have, I wouldn't feel that way. So it kind of goes hand in hand. But if you can have these conversations, then hopefully our kids can go into any restaurant they want, regardless of their color, not have to feel that way.
I mean, we can't ask people to not be human, right? And I love what you talked about earlier about these conversations that you're having, with your circle and then, extended circle, and hoping that go out. I mean, this is where this real change is going to begin, right? It's going to be this type of awareness and dialogue that's going to happen on local levels. And the next part of it is go and vote and go and change these rules, right? And go and make these, systemic changes. And, I think we've been hoping a lot in each generation. I mean, hoping that it's going to get better, right? That our kids are going to grow up in this, sometimes people say this colorblind society. And it's like, it's nice, it's pretty.
Yeah.
But
it's nice to think
unfortunately, really real revolutionary work is messy, and it's not always linear. I mean, I've asked some of my black friends, does this feel different? And they're like, they pause and they take a deep sigh and they say, it's the same thing over and over again. But I'm hesitant to say this, but it's starting to feel a little different, and I'm hoping it stays. So it's this, very cautious hope.
Yeah.
Is this where you and your wife, and where are you at?
Yeah. I think we fall into that same category. We've had our heart broken so many times, man. And so I don't want to hope for like it's sad to say, like it hurts my heart, man. I have a smile on my face, but like you feel like you just have a pit in your throat. It's just right here. And I don't want to get my hopes up that anything positive is going to happen, because it's happened so many times and nothing positive has come of it. When I have conversations like this, and I see, I went down to the plaza, the Black Lives Matter plaza, the other day, and with one of my buddies, one of my white friends, and that cheers me up, and that gives me a little semblance of hope. But it's happened so many times and nothing has changed. At least now, both my wife and I are in a position where we can, if I can't affect the law, I'm gonna for damn sure affect a few people throughout this thing. I got a bunch of people that take my classes every day when I do jiu-jitsu. So you're gonna hear some stories. Like, we're gonna talk about these things. We have a little bit of money so we can donate to some of these causes. So that's what it's gonna take. And I think I don't want a colorblind society. Like, I don't want people to say, oh, colors don't matter. Like, because colors do matter. It's awesome. Like, I love different cultures. I want to go get some Mexican food and some Thai food, and I want to learn about different cultures, and I love accents. But everybody is not like that. Like, some people think that their way is the only way. So let's have a big pot of gumbo Like that's how I want our country to be. Like let's mix all these flavors together. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
And let's value everybody's differences and talk about things that we don't agree about and support each other. And I think if there's one thing that I'm proud about with the protest this time around is, I think I said this before, is how much white people have supported this cause. Like that part does make me very happy. I hope it continues, because what can happen is, we get a little momentum and then it's not cool anymore, or people have to go back to their jobs.
Hmm.
And what happens when it becomes inconvenient for you to stand up for somebody for something that doesn't directly affect you? Will you continue to do it when it's not popular anymore?
Hmm.
And history has shown that, most of the time, it doesn't carry over. Hopefully this time it's different.
Yes, I hear that a lot as well. And it's like, what is going to actually change? Are these empty gestures? How do we keep the conversation going?
Yeah, I think there's the need to be uncomfortable a little bit. It's like, hey, let's talk about race. It's
Yeah.
like, it's just there's something to it, and yet I think that that's exactly what people need to experience. Like it should,
Yeah.
like anything worth doing, there's going to be uncomfortable portions of it, and
Yeah.
I think that the more that we're able to do that, the better. So, it's like, what else can we do?
Yeah. What people should do, like, who are avoiding these conversations because it is so uncomfortable for them, ask yourself, why is it so uncomfortable for you? Is it because you feel guilty for some reason, or is it because, whatever it is, ask yourself why it's so uncomfortable.
Well, like, cause I'll tell you why. Cause it's like, cause it sucks, man. It's like, it's not right what's happening. And,
Yeah.
and you are in a community that is just mathematically a minority.
Yeah.
And, and it's race relations, and it's just
Hmm.
one more pile on, and it sucks.
Yeah. And I think so. And I'm not talking directly at you. I'm just talking in this general person, right? Who feels they're uncomfortable with talking to a Black person about this issue. But they feel like they should have that conversation because, like how you said, you see what's going on and you know that it's wrong and it sucks. For most of us, if you're a decent human being, if you see anybody on the street that needs help, you help them. And right now, talking is, having these conversations is one way that you can help people. And race is the issue, is the matter here. But between us, race is just a thing. It's my skin happens to be this color, your skin happens to be that color. Um, you're not going to piss me off to ask me about it, and that's most people, So people shouldn't really be like, you kind of just have to get over it. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but get over it, because if you really care, you will want to help, and you can start helping by talking to somebody. It's not Black people against the police. I have plenty of friends my brother is a police officer. I don't want him to get hurt doing his job to control the crowds in these protests and stuff. I don't want anybody to get hurt in this matter. But, somebody got killed, and it has been happening. It has been happening for years. Breonna Taylor, she hasn't gotten as much notoriety. Police came in her apartment, didn't knock, no knock warrant, come in her apartment, start shooting. They shoot her 8 times and then arrest the boyfriend for defending himself. And nothing has happened to those officers yet. They passed a law that you can't do no knock warrants anymore, but nothing has happened to these officers. So the problem beyond the officers who do these things, why is it that they are continually allowed to get away? And if you truly believe that there is nothing wrong with the system that continues to allow people to get away with killing other people, regardless of whether you're an officer or not. This system is allowing certain people to get away with killing another group of people without any repercussions. Like you gotta be like either apathetic or insane to say that there's nothing wrong with the system that allows that. So, in any profession, you'll have people who really care about their profession and want to do their job. I'm a physical therapist. When I go see a patient, I really want them to get better because I care and I do my job. But in the same profession, you have people who don't care and they're just there. And you have physical therapists that come and they'll just sit by the bedside, write some notes, and walk out. You have doctors that are the same way. You have doctors that refuse to treat certain people because of their race, gender, or whatever. Why is it so hard for us to believe that there are people who wear badges all in those same categories? But you still, again, like I say, just because you have those bad people, that doesn't put a stain on the people who are trying to do their job the right way. The problem is also that the people who want to do their job the right way and want to actually serve their community and protect the people in their community, when they stand up to try to do the right thing, they get punished. There's something broken there. So let's talk about how to fix it. I don't have the answers. I can't tell you. I'm not a police officer. I know the job is tough. I know it. But, there's something wrong with the system. Let's talk about fixing it. It's been broken for generations now. If you try the wrong thing for generation after generation after generation, and you see that it's getting bad results, why is it so hard for us to contemplate or to fathom, maybe we should change something? Nobody's even saying, well, I'm not saying let's throw it all away, because there are going to be bad guys and there are going to be good guys. And so there are going to be people who are going to break the law. So you need police officers. But we need police officers who are actually here to serve and protect. And we need oversight. You can't police yourself.
Right.
Donna Taylor is a big example. They killed her. This was 3 months ago, and they just filed the police report on her, and it's empty. And they're allowed to get away with it. There's no details there. So when you have people police themselves, stuff like this is going to happen. Misconduct is going to happen. So it amazes me that when you offer that suggestion to some people, you get demonized. And they immediately would say, well, they're against the police officers. And, I'm just as heartbroken for the police officers that got injured and killed in the riots and protests as I am for the protesters that got injured. And I don't know if any of them got killed, but I know a number of them got injured. I would rather not have that happen on either side.
Just hearing that your brother is a police officer tells me you've had some probably really serious conversations with him over the last several weeks.
Oh, I don't even talk to him about this stuff anymore.
No, is he done?
actually, no. We did have a conversation, and I'll tell you, it was a rough one. So Tuesday was very hard for me. I remember I was only able to go see one patient, and then when I left that patient's house, I tried to get uptown, and I couldn't even get uptown because of all the blockades in the street and everything. And I was just hurting, man. I was infuriated, and I messaged my brother, who is a police officer, and he was upset also. Even in his position and his perspective, he is still upset because in his own office, his fellow officers are hitting themselves seemingly, we'll say seemingly, because I don't know exactly what their intentions were, but pitting themselves against the protesters and rioters. So meaning, this is our America. We're gonna, come down on them with the iron fist, and as you're teaching them a lesson. And it's, again, I understand that it's a hard job and your life is on the line. But as a human being, you will hope that people are able to see past the bullshit of, yes, there's the rioting and there's looting going on, and I have to go down there, do my job, and I want to come home safe at the end of the day. But there are also a whole bunch of people out here who are hurting. And there are a whole bunch of people out here who are protesting, the right way, or peacefully. We'll say peacefully, because who's to say what the right way is? And with that thought in mind, going down there and doing your job, rather than the thought in mind that you're going to go down there as a bruiser, as an iron fist, as an enforcer. And that was his experience as a police officer in his own department, as a Black man, having to go down to police a protest that he believes in. You know what I mean? So the conflict runs even deeper. Like, I guess I'm fortunate because I can kind of just think about, one side of it. I'm not a police officer, so I don't to be a black police officer in this time, like, that conflict runs even deeper than I can even understand.
Look, I know that some of the things that you've said, I just frankly haven't thought about it like that. And it's a little hard to hear. So I'm gonna have to process a little bit. It's gonna be okay for me to kind of process your perspective for a little bit. And like that's where it starts to sink in.
Yeah.
By the way, if you're listening out there, it's not that uncomfortable. It's okay. It's gonna be okay,
Yeah.
right?
So it's all right.
Just want to thank you for coming on. Thanks to your wife for taking kid duty tonight. And is awesome chatting with you, man.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me on here. And like you said, I'm sure I said a few things that rubbed a few people the wrong way, but this is how I feel. This is how I feel.
Yeah.
I will rather piss off a couple people if that means that more people will have, an understanding, or at least start to ask questions. You know,
Hey, we honest conversations. That's where it needs to happen. And it's powerful what you wrote on Facebook, and we're really really glad to be able to continue the conversation, and hope we can come up to DC soon when the quarantine's lifted, and see you and the kids and Jasmine again.
yeah, man.
All right, awesome, man. Thanks again for chatting. And
All right,
we'll see you around soon.
all right. See ya later.
All right, later,
Take
man.
care.
All right, so there's Chad. What do you think, Em?
What do I think? I mean, some of this stuff is heavy, and it's supposed to be uncomfortable by nature, but at the same time, when you're talking with someone who's a friend who you've met their family, like, it doesn't make it as daunting, right? That's something that I think is really important in what he brought about. And it's just like, hey, I'm just going to have these conversations. Take it or leave it. Hopefully most people will take it and use it to think on. And you and I don't have the same reality of growing up. I mean, having huge parts of our history left out, and that's something to, like, mull over in your mind, and to really to start to recognize. And we're just going to have to try to do better.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I told him as much. I mean, some of the things are hard to hear. It's hard to hear about America. It's hard to hear when someone says that they have a different allegiance, at least emotionally, right? When you say,
Out of necessity.
yeah, out of necessity. And so, I mean, we didn't actually get into the Colin Kaepernick stuff with the flag, and that stuff gets really messy. So, look, I'm not here right now to to stand on my pulpit and tell you anything with regards to that. I can tell you that was hard for me personally, and yet I think part of the struggle is that it's important to understand at a minimum someone's perspective, and so that's part of it. A stronger team, a stronger America, stronger communities. You need to understand what makes those communities tick. And the Black community is a vibrant and vital part of our country. And so, if anything, the amount and volume of people who are out protesting for justice, equality, all those big words for the Black community, it's a good sign. And part of this is we've got to turn the mirror on our country a little bit more, and that's an uncomfortable thing, but that's where growth comes from. So I'm trying to learn along the way. I think a lot of us are, and I think that, look, it really helps if you have someone around and you can talk to them. We were in our garage here, and we're chatting with Chad, and there is a video component. We can see each other, even though it only comes out as audio. And we've met Chad face to face. We've spent a little bit of time with him, which also makes it easier. So if you have a little bit of a connection with someone, I think what he's saying is, hey, you have a license to. It's okay. You can say, hey, can we talk about this? I feel like that door has been opened now, and there's a lot of value that comes from walking through it.
listen, not everybody has the same experience growing up. And, we all have variations of something, but, there are some relatable things that we can all go to the well on. I mean, like, Jason, you had a different upbringing than I did. You moved around all the time, different place schools, every year or two. I lived in the same community and there was a lot of diversity and I had a lot of interaction with, people of a lot of different races. I mean, Jacksonville surprisingly was a place where a lot of immigrants came in and it was, majority of the schools there was almost a 50% black and white racial divide. So it's just a different type of experience, and yet there's all I'm still learning. That there's things that I'm still learning all the time, and that's kind of the we can't just be like, okay, yeah, I did that, check the box. It's like constantly asking ourselves, like, hey, is this really, do other people have the same sort of, opportunities that I have? And how can we both work hard together and make America, the country that we love, right? It's not really about, I think there's always this competition, like, well, this lot will be taken. And, it's like, wow, I honestly want like there to be the best person in the job or accepted in the school or in that the true meritocracy sort of situation. And we just have some more work to do to make that a reality for the Black community. And that's what this conversation is about.
All right, so here's a common theme you'll get from the GORUCK community. It's time to go out and be a little bit uncomfortable. This is might be a little bit different than picking up a log or something, but
Do the work.
do the work. And so maybe go find someone, go work out with them, and go ask them about their lives. So thanks so much for listening. We appreciate your time, and we'll catch you next time.